I'm at a meeting right now.
Y'all heard it? He said he was at a meeting. Y'all hear that?
Meeting of the minds.
Meeting is something. Well, what's going on, everybody? Welcome back to our free Friday night seminars. Appreciate each and every one of you guys coming out. Got some weather rolling in this weekend, huh? That ought to be fun. A little sporty. Brought this guy. Got to tell you a little story about this guy real quick. First of all, this is my buddy Zach Hughes, guide out here. Lake Fork Guide, ZachHughes.com for those of you out there. He comes highly recommended from me, that's for sure. Other than being ugly, he's a pretty good fishing guide. But this guy's probably the best sight fisherman I've ever known. Like, he's really good at looking at them and catching them. He's also just a ton of experience in the outdoors and of hunting and fishing, and he backs it up all the time. He did something that I haven't heard of anybody doing in quite some time out here. He had his customers catch a
10-20.
10-20 one morning. First fish of the morning,
First fish of the morning.
That was a great story. I'm going to let you tell the story. But 10-20 one day, goes out the very next day, and what'd your customer catch?
A 947, and then caught a 12-24.
12-24. So back-to-back double-digit class fish on back-to-back days. It's been a long time since I've heard of anybody doing that. That's pretty outstanding work by you, and just verification of everything that we tell you about this guy. He's unbelievably skilled at catching these big bass. So, Zach, tell us, first thing I want to do with you, I want you to tell us the story of those two double-digit catches.
Well, I mean, I tell people all the time, when you catch a big fish on this lake, especially on a bed, it's like winning the lottery. A double-digit fish. Now, big fish, I think, out of the last 8 days, we've had a fish over 8 pounds, but a big fish is 10 plus, 11 plus.
Yeah.
Whatever. So catching one of those off beds is like winning the lottery. But I'm going to show you, or tell you, 3 different ways of how you're going to find fish on this lake. And each one of the big fish that we've caught this last week has been a different scenario. The 10-20 we caught, we pulled up into a pocket in Glade, a little drain, and I knew they were about to bust loose. The day before, I could see a bunch of big females cruising around. They weren't really locked on. I told my customer, I said, man, we got a really good chance of catching a big fish today. Pulled up, and the water had changed overnight. It was real dirty in there the day before. You really couldn't see the beds. I could tell they were about to get on beds, but it was like that morning, the water just cleared up. The wind switched around out of the north. It wasn't making it real muddy. Pulled up, found about a 3 or 4 pound male, and I said, let's fish for it. It was pretty locked on, and I had my customer flipping in there, and the male was kind of acting like he was going to bite. All of a sudden, I see this big old black shadow just come out of nowhere up to the bed, and I thought, holy cow, you know. And I said, just shake it. And every time he would shake it, she would inch a little closer. And he caught her on about the 5th flip. And it was just luck, you know. We were fishing for that male. She saw it, and she come in there and ate it. The next day, the 947, we before lunch, kid was from Iowa. Really cool kid, man. Loved to fish. It reminded me of when I was 12 or 13 years old. I think he was in the 8th grade or 9th grade, but loved to fish. From Iowa, biggest fish he'd ever caught was 4 pounds. Went back into Glade, found another big female. He caught her. She weighed 947. We go into lunch, and at that time there was probably 25, 30 boats back in Glade. And
it has been quite the boat show back there, that's for sure.
But I'm going to tell you, I don't mind fishing around boats like that, and I'll tell you why here in just a second. But we go into lunch, we go back out, and he says, man, you think we'll catch a bigger one? And I'm honestly thinking to myself, there's no way you're catching a bigger one than 947. All the boats were up on the bank, and the water had cleared up a lot better from the day before, so I said, let's go look for some deeper beds in the bushes. And the first hole we pulled to in some of that buckbrush, I looked down, and there she was. And I mean, she was locked. He flipped in there, and she just went, and I said, holy cow, man, you're about to catch a double digit. I had no idea she was 12-24, but I think he caught her on the 3rd flip. So that is truly like winning the lottery. You never find a big fish like that.
Well, you can sit here and tell us how it's, you know, how much it's like winning the lottery, but there's something to having the ability to see fish and having the knowledge and the wherewithal, because when you do it 2 days in a row, it's kind of not lucky anymore.
Well, that's what I'm going to try to talk to you about. People come out to this lake and they bed fish, and it drives them crazy because they go down and beat the banks. I think when we did the video, last year, 20 boats went right down the bank, and all those fish that most people can see, they get hammered on. And what we did to catch those big fish in Glade is we moved off the bank. People don't realize Glade Creek, for about 150 yards off the bank, is 4 foot deep. You can go maybe in some spots 500 yards off the bank, and it's really 3-4 foot deep. Well, those fish don't need to bed on the bank. They can bed out there in 3 and 4 foot deep, especially the bigger fish. So what I do with my customers a lot of times is pull out, you know, and I'll fish the high spots out there, and you know, those bigger fish aren't going to pull up in 2 foot of water. They will sometimes, but the bigger fish I feel like will bed in that 3 to 4 foot of water off the bank where people aren't messing with them. And those 2 fish are perfect examples of that.
And that's the big advantage of those fish that aren't up there where everybody can see them. Because, and kind of the saying that I've gone with that I tell customers all the time is, man, if you're only catching the fish that you can count spots on, you're not going to catch very many good fish, sight fishing. And that's the deal. Those fish out there, a lot of times, can be easier to catch than the 3-pounder that's on the bank because everybody's done flipped at him. And these fish aren't getting the attention.
Well, I tell people all the time, man, if my customers could see them, and this is not a bash against my customers, but if my customers can see them, pretty much anybody on the lake can see them. I want those fish, and I'll focus on water that's a little dingier, maybe got wind blowing on it, and that's the 2 things people say they don't want to bed fish in. Well, to me, that means those fish haven't been messed with as much. You know, you see everybody goes into a pocket and they go to the slick side of the bank. Me, I go opposite. I go to the windy side because those fish are probably not going to be messed with as much, and they'll bite a lot sooner. We did it the last week. We've done that, and I moved down south because some of the fish up north, I've been catching a lot of post-spawn fish. I feel like they're waiting on the second wave up north, so I moved back down south, and it's just, man, those fish are so spooky down here because the water's a lot clearer, people can see them a lot better, and they're just messed with. I mean, everybody's sight fishing right now, and it's because the bite for me this week has been a little tougher than last week.
Yeah, just the regular non-sight fish. I've been predominantly sight fishing, A, because I'm kind of addicted, but B, because, it's like we're not catching we're spending so much time sight fishing, we're not hardly catching very many fish that we're not looking at. A little bit.
I think they're in that second, after the first wave moved up, you got a lot of fish that have already spawned out. We caught an 822 yesterday, and she looked like a Marlboro Light. She was long, 24.5 inches long, and she was skinny.
That's pretty good.
She was just a big old fish, big old bug eyes, and if we would have caught her last week, she probably would have weighed 9.5, but she weighed 822. She'd spawned out, and that was up north. We came down today, down on the south end, and we caught a 845 right off the bat, and then he caught a 765. So, and they both had eggs. So I feel like, I was talking to another guide on the lake, and every year, this lake, at first they'll spawn up north, Glade, Running, Rogers, and after we beat on them for a couple days, it's like you can move down to the south end and catch them moving up again, and then here in a couple days, I'll go back north and try to get that second wave, and then I'll work back down the lake. So you guys can use that as a tool when you're out here. If you're up north, you're catching a bunch of post-spawn fish, and you want to catch some big females off bed, just come a little bit more south, and every female we caught today had eggs still in her, and the ones we caught yesterday up north were mostly spawned out.
Yep.
So,
well, let's get into some technique-specific stuff, because I really want to do that. I know me and you are probably 2 of the most adamant about sight fishing. We probably do it I know you do it as much, and I do it as much as anybody on this lake. So I thought it'd be interesting if me and you kind of went back and forth and talk about the stuff we do the same, and talk about the stuff that we do different, because there's always different ways to skin the cat.
I'm going to tell you exactly like I do my day. If you were to book a trip with me, this is what we would do. We would go into a pocket where I've seen fish, or I feel like there's big females at, and I see a lot of people go down the lake and they're not even fishing. The way the watercolor is right now, you're not going to see a lot of those big fish. A really cool trick that I do, and I know a lot of guides and pros do it too, is I throw a search bait, a swim bait like this. You don't have to see a fish to know she's on a bed. This bait right here, if you throw it up, you're bringing it down a bank and you see a fish roll on it or come up and hit it and you missed it. The 845 today, It was dark, cloudy, rainy this morning. My customer threw it, and I could see the orange spot. He reeled across there and just, well, he missed her. And I said, that fish is on a bed, no doubt. It's just the way she was sitting on he threw it across an orange spot. He reeled it across.
When you say orange spot, exactly.
Okay.
Explain that a little more in depth. So the people that don't
on this lake, and it differs from lakes across the country. On this lake, if you're going down a bank and you see a real bright orange spot, that didn't get there by chance. That fish, when a male comes up on bed, he'll sit there and fan that area and get it cleared off. Try to get some gravel. Bass like bedding on a real sandy bottom or a little pea gravel, and what that fish is doing, he's fanning that bed to try to get it cleaned off for a female. So
get rid of all the debris. If there's any snodgrass or moss or even just silt, the silt that runs in the lake over time, they're going to get down to that kind of, around here a lot of times it's clay or iron ore rock, but they're going to get down to that hard base, and it's going to expose that red clay that, red dirt in Texas, everybody knows about that, but that's why
it looks like an orange spot. Yep. And that spot didn't get there because all of a sudden the weather changed and just a bunch of orange spots came up there. So when you hear me talk about orange spots today, I'm talking about a bed. A fish makes a nest like a bird. What happens is the males go up there, they'll clear out a spot and they sit there, and then the females move up, and she's gonna pick a male that she likes to bed. She likes the male where he's bedding, and she'll pull up with him. I think a big misconception in bed fishing is the females are there a long time. They're not. I've seen a female be there for 2 hours and gone. I've actually watched a female, thought she wasn't ready, go to lunch, come back, and she was gone already. And the fish had I could tell there was eggs or fry there. So and over the years I fished for a female as long as 3 days. I found a fish in Little Mustang probably 6 years ago that I know was well over 13 pounds. I fished for 3 days and never caught her. So they could be there for 2 hours, they could be there for 3 days. You never know.
They're all different. Males too. I've seen males stay there 2 to 3 weeks sometimes.
Oh yeah.
And sometimes males will stay there for a couple 3 days and you don't see them anymore.
Yeah. But this bait right here, especially on a cloudy day where you can't see them, even this morning, it was tough for me to see them. What I have my customers doing is just throwing this bait around, and wherever we saw a fish come after it, I mean, he did catch some fish on it, so it's a good search bait to catch fish on. But wherever I saw him throw and I saw a fish chase it or blow up on it, we went back and looked later and eventually ended up catching a fish, sight fishing. If you ever sight fish very much, if you watch a fish down there, anytime a brim or a shad or a minnow comes by, boy, they'll chase it off. And this is what I'm trying to mimic there, just by trying to find a fish that I can't see good. Now, on a bright sunny day, I don't throw this very much because I'll be able to see them. But on a cloudy day or the water's a little murky, this will tell you a lot of times where a bed is.
Now, if you're going down, and a couple things. This is the best search bait out here right now, in my opinion, because of the cover the bass are using to spawn in. Now, you can use a swim jig or a chatterbait or a square bill. Like, there's a lot of different baits, a wake bait, that'll have those fish kind of flash on it and expose themselves to you, and you can use all of them, and none's necessarily better than the other. It kind of is cover dependent. Well, out here we've got a full lake, we've got a lot of flooded cover, we've got a lot of kind of mossy, slimy grass going on, so that's where these fish are spawning. So you need something totally weedless, like a weedless swim bait, to go through all that stuff efficiently. So that's the best bait out here. But
yeah,
when you're searching with that bait and one rolls on it or pops up, blows up on it, whatever, and you see the fish, do you now stop and flip to that fish, or you just mark it in your head and keep going?
What I'll do is I'll mark it in my head, wait. Like this morning, we had several fish eat it, roll on it, but it just wasn't light enough to bed fish. I knew my customer wouldn't be able to see them. It was hard for me to see them. So what I'll do is mark that spot in my mind, or by a tree, overhanging tree or something. And then when it gets light enough to see, about 9 or 10 o'clock, that sun will get high enough where it'll put enough rays through the water where you can see them a lot better. I see people come out here all the time and they start bed fishing at 7 o'clock, and I'm like, if we can't see them, it's going to be hard. And that, I say that, but I have caught fish where I knew they were on bed and catch them before, just by blind flipping. That's another really good
That's what
technique.
I was trying to add. Do you ever just blind flip to them, or
You can. A lot of times what I've been having my customers do if a fish, and it's early, is if a fish rolls up on it and misses it, I got several Senko rods reeled up in the, or spooled up in the boat. I'll say, grab that Senko and throw it right there where she did. And then if they don't eat that, then we'll go look at her. But a lot of times if a fish rolls up on this and you get a Senko or a fluke in there, she'll eat it because she's chasing anything that comes around the bed. But that's another good technique that I had customers doing, especially Wednesday and Thursday when we had a lot of wind out here, is I would see orange spots, but I couldn't tell if there was fish there. We were fishing beds in 3 to 4 foot of water. And I would just power pull down and I would tell my customers, all right, there's an orange spot there, there's one there. And I would tell them to make 5 casts in each one. And you won't believe how many times you do that. If you back off of them and blind cast at them, that you'll catch that fish. Especially like last week when we had, when it got real warm, every fish I saw in Glade Creek had every bed I saw in Glade Creek had a fish on it. So that's a day that, man, I could just power pull down and have my customers blind cast on it. And a lot of times you'll see the fish flash on it or something like that. And that's
the backing off them is a big deal, especially out here where you get a lot of boat traffic, a lot of boat pressure on these fish. We had a fish this week that, and I try to do this a lot, like even if they are in shallow water, like if I see a fish in shallow water and it's a good fish and it's locked on, I'll try to catch it even though I know somebody else has probably looked at it, but maybe not. Well, if you're up there where you can see it good and you flip in there, these fish, it'll still come back to the bed, but it won't like get right up on the bait, it won't commit and it won't bite. A lot of times that's what will happen. And we had one this week where I set up just a little bit too close to it. I like to set up where I can just barely see them and have my customers barely see them. And we were just a little too close and we were flipping that bait in there and that fish would leave and he would loop and come right back. And it was a big male. He would loop and come right back, but he never would get right up on the bait or bite it. And all I did was I just picked my poles up, backed up 10 feet maybe, and put my poles back down. Now I actually can't see the fish unless he turns or does something. But when I stopped, I couldn't see the fish. Flipped in there, shook it in the bed. The fish went up on its side. You could see it plain as day. He bit. We caught him on the first flip, and we backed away from him. So same fish, same thing. I never left. I just backed up a little bit. Me being that much further away from him, I made him bite immediately.
Yeah, another good trick is when I'm fishing beds, I turn my front electronics off. Okay. If you've ever gotten a water when your electronics are going, you can hear the tick, 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 tick. Those fish know what that is. So a lot of a good trick to do if you're really up shallow sight fishing is turn those front electronics off. Because I mean, what are you looking at in 1 foot of water anyway? So
you're looking at it with your eyes.
Yeah, turn that electronics off, and it'll get that ticking noise out, and you'll see the fish calm down a lot more.
That's a good one.
But I want to stress this. This is the biggest thing in bed fishing. I find fish every day. I know Billy. I know Ronnie does. That you just can't catch. They're either not ready, they don't have an attitude. So my rule of thumb is when I'm going down looking for bed fish, and this is when you can see them really good. If I pull up on a fish and we go by her from here to this lady, and she sits there and stares at the trolling motor, that fish is probably going to get caught. If you pull up to them and as soon as you see her, she darts off, probably not a chance to catch that fish right then. Now you may could back off of her, but really in sight fishing, it's not about what bait you throw. It's not about what time of month it is. It's about what that fish's attitude at that moment is. I try to teach people, if you start judging the fish before you ever fish for her, you'll catch a lot more fish. Instead of sitting there, guys sit there 30, 40 minutes. I will not sit on a fish more than 30 minutes unless she's over 8 pounds. Today we had to set on one a long time because the male was up there and the male was eating it every time we pitched in there. But the female would just inch up there. I could tell she was interested in it, and we just finally had to get that male caught, put back, and where he was spooked to the bait. And then she finally said, you know what, I'm going to go up there and guard the bed. And if you want to catch the true giant off a bed, that's what you're going to have to do. Catching a fish in 3 flips like that kid did, that's just pure luck that we pulled up on that right time. So I guess the biggest thing I can tell y'all about sight fishing is judge the fish before you ever start fishing for it. That'll help you out. You'll hear me go down the bank and I'll say, oh, we can catch that fish. When they sit there and come at that trolling motor head, to try to move that trolling motor off its bed, we're going to catch that fish.
Yeah.
But if I go down the bank and I see it and it's taking off, there's a 30% chance we'll catch that.
It's all about reading their attitude. That is 1,000% the most important thing. And like Zach said, when you're going down, obviously the one that as soon as you can see him, that sucker darts off. That fish, I don't care if he's 11 pounds or 2 pounds, he's really not worth your time because you're not going to catch that fish. Now, I've seen fish that will. Two things that I look at is the speed in which they leave the bed and how quick are they to turn around and go head back towards it. If that fish darts off, but he only darts off 5 or 10 feet and he whips around and kind of runs back to the bed, you can probably catch that fish. It may not be real easy because he's a little spooky, but you can probably catch that fish. So if it's a big one that kind of zips out and then zips back, and you feel like investing some time in it, it's big enough that you want to spend some time on it, probably catch that fish. If a fish leaves real slow, but she goes a long ways before she ever turns around, again, that fish, in my opinion, not really catchable. But if a fish leaves real slow and just goes a little ways and turns around, starts easing towards the bed, she's probably pretty catchable. So it's just about reading their attitude. And it's when I say their attitude, basically what I'm referring to is how committed are they to that spot? That spot you first saw them on, how committed are they to that spot? If they're committed to that spot and they're willing to brave your boat presence to get back over there, you probably catch that fish.
Yeah, 100%. And that's the number one thing that people don't get through their mind.
They see a fish and they want to catch it.
They see a fish and they think they're going to catch it. I passed up probably 30 fish today and I saw that I was like, we're probably not going to catch that fish in 30 minutes, so let's go on to one that we can make by.
We saw one this week that she was the biggest fish I've ever seen relating to a bed on this lake. She was a true freak of nature, probably a teen class fish. She was easily way over 10. And when we first pulled around, she was around a corner of reed heads in this little corner, and the male was up there, and he was stuck on the bed, and she was just kind of cruising around it. She kind of cruised back this way, and I thought, all right, the boat's going by her. She's not really bailing out. She's going to be catchable. My initial assessment was, if I give her some time, she'll get settled in, we'll catch her. Well, we flipped around, got out at a distance, sat the boat down, made a couple flips in there to the male, never saw her. Finally see her again, but now she's like 15 feet off the bed. She came in, kind of looked from about 15 feet out, and turned around and left. Now, we waited for about 30 or 40 minutes because this is a once-in-a-lifetime fish. But we wasted that 30 or 40 minutes. She was never going to get caught. No matter what I did, no matter how long I waited. And I finally, after 30 or 40 minutes, I told those guys, and we were all sick about it, I was like, boys, I know. We all want to catch this fish, and I promise you I'll do as bad as y'all do, but there's no chance. It's not going to happen. And that's one of the hardest things to do in bed fishing is to see a freak of nature fish and turn your back on it and just leave it while you can still see it. But she wasn't going to get caught.
Mm-hmm. No, I mean, you're not going to catch every fish. And on a lake like this, you see a lot of big fish. Like I said, I fished for that one. I know she was over 13. I fished for 3 days. You could bounce a jig off her ear hole, and she wouldn't do nothing. She's just a big fish. And people think they're going to catch every fish on a bed, and they're not.
Yeah.
Let's talk about what a fish when she's locked on a bed, and you'll hear me say a lot of times she's rolling around on it or she's spinning on it. When I pull up to a bed and I find a fish and we get backed off, I'll have my customers flip in past the bed. I see a lot of people, and it does. I know flipping is not the easiest thing to do. It takes a lot of practice. But I see a lot of people crash a bait on that bed, and that's the worst thing you could do to a fish because she knows that bait's coming in there. I can see a lot of times I can see a fish watch the bait come over the top of them and they'll spook off. So those fish can see that bait. So when you find a bed, you get locked down on it, and the fish is in there. What I have my customers do is flip past the bed, probably 2 foot, bring it in there. And what I tell my customers to do is pretend a fish has ears. And the biggest thing I see people do is they try to put that bait out in front of that fish's face. Well, you don't realize that if that bait's that far away from that fish, it could be off the bed. She's not going to run out there. Now, you will have your occasional male chase it down like a wolf and eat it. But what I try to tell my customers to do is pretend like a fish has an ear.
Right there in the gill plate.
And work it right to the side of her face. And every fish is going to eat a bait different. Today, one of the big fish wanted it just shaking in there. Some of the fish, like it flared up in their face where you could get those claws to pulsate in front of their face. That's going to be your judge on what that fish is like, or what that fish wants. And you'll figure that out by watching that fish.
Yeah. My process on that is I want the first flip as close to her nose as I can get it without touching her, and progressively a little bit further to her ear. Like if my first flip ends up this far in front of her, I want the next one to be that far, and I want the next one to be that far, and then I want to start working it into her eye or her ear area on the side of her head, just like Zach said. I like to kind of ease into that, bumping them with it, just to make sure that she's not just one that just needs to be dealt with real tender. And if you put your 2 cents on this as well, please do. If you do throw it and kind of work it into the side of her head, into her ear, and you shake it, it makes her kind of get out of the bed, and then she comes back. That might not be a fish you want to bang on a whole lot. Like you might have to be a little bit, just try to get right on her nose instead of putting it back here. Just tone down the aggression.
I don't ever get real aggressive with them. I know when we shot that video, you like to bang it, and you do have to do that on some fish.
I'll progressively, like if one will let me hit it right here and it doesn't move, then I'll start popping it, and I'll kind of ramp it up till it shows me a negative cue, then I'll dial it back.
Yeah, I try to finesse them. I try to get those fish. What I want that fish to do is start turning on that bed. If they're running off and coming back, it's going to take you a while. But if I can throw that bait across that bed, bring it into her ear hole, and that fish, you'll see a lot of them get yellow. I hear people say all the time, well, she turned over on it, but I couldn't catch her. If that fish is turning over on that bait, I guarantee you 100% you could catch that fish, no doubt. What they're doing is working it out of the bed too fast, and that's another huge thing. You don't realize how much line you're pulling when you when you reel that handle a quarter turn. These new high-speed reels we got right now, I see people all the time. They throw it past them and they just work it like this. When you pull your rod tip that far, that bait's moving that far. Well, a fish's nest is, maybe that big or maybe that big. So when you're working it through the bed, they're pulling that bait off. I like to say, try to leave that bait in that bed as long as possible. It's just like, if you leave a bait in there for 10 minutes, you got 10 minutes worth of opportunity for that fish to bite it. If you're throwing it in there for 1 second, bringing it out, 1 second, bringing it out, that fish is like, what's going on? That a normal crawfish or bluegill or something like that is not running in that bed and running out. They're in there sitting there trying to eat the eggs, or that's what those fish are thinking. This bait is in there and it's trying to do something to my nest, and I want to get it out of that bed. That fish is not trying to eat that bait because it's hungry. A fish this time of year that's locked on a nest, a female, they do not care about eating that bait to get it in their stomach at all. What they're trying to do is pick that bait up, get it off that bed, or scare it off the bed. So when I see people working it too fast, I'm like, man, you're not even giving that fish a chance to eat the bait, much less move it.
That's something I see a lot as well. Is you get people out there and you tell them, and I'm sitting here doing this, and my rod tip's literally moving this much at the most, and I'm really not even. I've got slack line when I'm doing that, so all I'm doing is just shaking that slack and just trying to make that bait do this without really moving. And then you handle the rod, and they go to shaking it, and they start doing this. Now look how much my rod tip's moving this much. Well, every time that rod moves that much, if you tighten that slack before you move it, you basically in 2 shakes just move that bait completely away from that fish. You're all the way now down in the front of the bed or out of the front of the bed, and that fish has no interest, no reason to have interest in biting that bait.
That goes back to all the way, let the fish determine what she wants. When I became a good bed fisherman is when I would come out here when I was a kid on my own, and I would mess with these fish, man. I was just trying to figure out, how could I get as many fish to bite as possible. And I did the same thing everybody does. Go down the bank and think they could catch every bed fish. And I finally started clicking in my head, well, every bed fish is not ready. They're just like us. If I'm sitting on the couch and I get hungry or I get pissed off, I'm going to say something to somebody. Well, if I'm just sitting there relaxed, I'm fine. A fish is the exact same way. So if you guys learn to read that fish before you ever flip a bait in there, you'll catch a whole heck of a lot of fish and waste a whole heck of a lot less time. And that's what bed fishing is about. How many fish can we catch in the least amount of time? I see a lot of guys sitting on fish for an hour, 2 hours. I'm like, man, you know, unless she's a true giant. Now, I have sat on a true giant for ungodly amount of time. But, you know, if you're trying to catch a 5 or 6 pound fish, just go down the bank. You'll find another one, especially this time of year. This is the bait that I throw. Everybody throws a little different bait. Mr. Twister is my sponsor. Like I said, the bait is not that big of a deal. I like something compact. This is a Mr. Twister Buzz Bug. It's with a tungsten weight, 1/4 ounce tungsten weight, and it's pegged. The best thing you guys can do is put a bobber stopper. You can buy them for 99 cents. They come pack of 10. And what that does, it lets that bait stay to that weight, because a lot of times you're flipping on a bed and it's got a limb over it or something, and if that weight will slide down, your weight's down here in your bait, you have no action. So when I'm flipping a bed bait, you guys can pass that around. All that is a bobber stopper for a crop, keeps a bobber from going up the line, and it keeps that weight real compact, especially if you're fishing grass or something like that. You want that bait super compact. I don't like a bait with a lot of tentacles on it. I feel like that's a big waste. I want something small and compact that I can get that hook as far back of the rear end of that bait. That way when the fish does grab it. I see a lot of people throwing lizards, and I grew up throwing lizards before they come out with these crawls. But I feel like if you fish a bait like this, you know, I see a lot of people, they jerk 4 or 5 times and they come back with half the bait. If I can get as much hook into that bait as possible, you got a better chance of hooking that fish quick. So that's why I throw something compact. I like something with a little paddle tail on the end of it like that, or claws. That way when you're moving that bait, those claws are pulsating. I'll tell my customer all the time, get those claws pulsating. And what I want that to do is I want that bait to flash in front of that fish's face. A little compact bait like that Buzz Bug will help you fish grass a lot better. It'll help you flip over limbs a lot better, because you don't have a lot of tentacles to get that bait to turn around. Now on a bigger fish, you will eat a bigger bait, but I fish that bait on every bed fish.
But that big old fish will eat that little bait too.
Oh, 100%, 100%.
Now let's talk about, so the bait that I've mostly been using is not this particular one, but it's dang near identical. It's a compact creature bait. It has little legs that kick, and it has 2 little legs. Like, it's just like this. I'm actually using one of the Guggen baits, believe it or not, the Bandito Bug. It's just a little compact creature bait with 2 little swimming legs on the back of it. It's basically the exact same thing as this. I would have no problem using this. It's the same deal. Let's talk about a trick that
I brought you guys some, so if you take a bag and pass it around, if nobody gets one, text me or email me or shoot me something, and I'll get you a bag if there's not enough.
So I just Zach graciously, Mr. Twister provided Buzz Bugs for everybody in the crowd tonight.
Yeah.
Packed for everybody. So thank you for that, Zach. And thank you to Mr. Twister. Let's talk about. It's kind of funny because years ago now, it's been a few years back now, but you kind of showed me this deal, and I've kind of adopted it. And I know you do it some, but you can see this is my sight fishing rig here, and I got that bead on there. Now I've got, if you notice, I got it pegged too, but that just keeps it. All I do is with the peg, I just leave like a 1/4 inch gap between my weight and my peg, so the peg still keeps everything nice and compact for coming through cover and stuff when I'm trying to get it up to that bed. But yet I have a little room for it to. Can't really hear it out loud, but
it just makes a clacking sound.
Makes
like
a little clicking noise.
When you use a Carolina rig, people say you want a clacker on there. Well, it's the same thing in bed fishing. We started using those beads a long time ago. I'm not the one that created it, but right. I felt like if I could make a little noise, the way we found out about it is we were fishing, and we threw it in there, and this fish was sitting way off the bed. And I said, man, we got to do something. We put a bead on there, started shaking it, and all of a sudden that fish come right in there.
And when you got that bait in that bed and you sit there and you just get a little light tickle on the end of your slack, and that weight just sits there and goes tick, 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 it'll make them turn around and look at it.
Back when I was a kid, we used to do the old trick with the Gitsits. We'd put an Alka-Seltzer up the rear end of it and get it to fizz. And that's kind of something like that. Just something to irritate the fish to do. Now, I don't know if they make Gitsits anymore, but that's what my daddy had me throwing when I was a kid out on this lake. And we would take Alka-Seltzer and run it up the rear, and it'd fizz and stuff. Anything you could do to get those fish to get irritated and come to that bed is what I like to try. I will tell you, if you do fish a bead, and like that one I showed you, I cut it off my rod today.
Perfect amount of bait. Did you count that?
No, I didn't count that.
That's a perfect amount of bait. See, that worked real good.
A lot of times when you do, I cut this one off. I had a bead on it this morning, but my customer broke it off, so we were fishing for one more fish. I just put it on like this. She was pretty aggressive. You don't have to use a bead, but on a fish that you can't get to bite or something, try a bead, and it may make a difference.
Yeah, I've seen a fish that you'll throw your bait in there and she'll kind of turn off the bed or kind of point her head out of the bed, not really look at the bait. And you flipping that silent bait in there, she's not really, that's what she's doing. You flip that bead bait in there and she turns to go like this and you just shake it, it goes click, 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 and she goes, what? And turns right. A fish that wouldn't look at a bait, put that noise on there, she'll turn around and look, and then she starts nosing into it and you get her. I
will tell you, if you do use a bead, watch your line, because that bead will chafe. If you catch more than 2 or 3 fish on it, you'll get your heart broke. I do it. I'm the world's worst, is I'm like, oh, I catch a 5th fish on it. And all of a sudden that fish will bite and you'll set the hook and just pop. But that bead, if you leave a gap like we do, it will chafe your line. So if once you catch 1 or 2 fish, push it on up and retie. That'll help. That'll save you a lot of heartburn.
One thing that helps is if you tie a snell knot, the bead won't be hitting your actual knot, and that helps a lot. I think that's where it gets you the worst, is on your knot. You can use a product called Knot Shield to protect your knot, but even with that, just straight line, that bead does chafe. So you gotta. I like to go no more than about, especially if they're big fish, about 2 fish, and I'm retying. Yeah, I mean,
yeah, or if you find a big one, you retie.
If you find a big one, you could have just caught a 2-pounder on it, and that's it. But you're gonna retie on a big one, yeah.
Yeah.
Did you say what kind of line you were using on that kind of setup?
I'm a big believer in fluorocarbon line. I use 15-pound fluorocarbon unless I'm throwing a topwater. A lot of people like a little bigger line, but
yeah, I throw 20-pound. You throw 15.
I throw 15 on, and it's just I don't know that they can see it. I don't really know that it matters. I keep a rod with braid in there in case we find a big one that is locked on and she's not scary, but I throw 15-pound fluorocarbon, and I've never had a problem with it. Yeah, you'll have fish break you off, but everybody does that, you know. This is 15-pound Seaguar fluorocarbon is what I use for bed fishing.
Yeah, I use 20-pound.
Yeah.
I'm a little more scared than Zach is. He's a little braver than me, folks. Well, that's cool line. So let's high speed gear ratio reels are an important deal for sight fishing, I think.
Yeah, I use a Shimano 7.3-to-1 Corrado.
7.3-to-1.
And the only reason I do that, it's kind of twofold. Like I told you, when you move that high speed reel, you're moving that bait a lot further. But when you do hook a fish, a lot of times what that fish will do, like I said, is she's not want to eat that bait. So if you catch a fish on a Cinco or something, you actually feel that fish hold off and walk on. If you watch a bed fish grab a bait, she'll suck that bait in and blow it out as fast as you can set the hook. And what that high speed ratio reel will do, it'll let you get a little bite on her to get her out of cover or get that hook set. Or if you got my customers, they'll swim it out to the boat lane and then you tell them to set
There's actually another, sometimes. There's actually another really good sight fisherman here tonight, Ron Kelly's here, and the one thing that he's always talking about, and it's very true, is a lot of times when you're bed fishing, that fish has no choice but to come right at you when you set the hook. So just, the higher, gear ratio reel you can get to use, kind of the better in that deal, because you're not ever moving the bait with your reel handle at all. You're not moving the bait much at all. So it's good to be able to pick as much slack up as you can when that fish runs at you. Rods. Now, I've got this one on way too big of a rod. I've been using it. This is a new rod that's coming out for 6 cents in a couple months. And it's really, really light. It's the only one I got, so I've been using it a lot because I'm trying to kind of learn this rod and learn all the ins and outs of it. But this is a 7.7 heavy. That's a terrible idea. That's like the worst idea for sight fishing. You're not, usually 15 or 20 or 30 feet at the most from the fish. So you don't need a big old heavy rod to drive that hook home. And in fact, it can cause you to break off on your hook set if your rod's too big. Really what you need is something, in my opinion, like a 7-foot medium heavy or a 7.2 medium heavy. Something like that to me is ideal for sight fishing. How about you?
Exactly. And another key to that is I use a Dobbin 733, and just because Dobbin is my sponsor, but I like
a 7.3 medium heavy. Basically,
it's a 7'3" medium heavy with a fast tip, And a lot of times you'll see me, if I'm sight fishing, I'm shaking that bait. And what that does, if you got a real heavy rod, it's pulling that bait. But if you can sit there and get that tip to whipping, it leaves that bait in the same spot. Also, when you bang them, you know, you're not pulling them with a broomstick and breaking the line, or there's not much give when you're 5 foot away from a fish.
Yeah.
So let your rod be the give between you and the bait. The fluorocarbon has no stretch. Your reel is not going to really spin out, or the drag's not going to really spin out on a hook set. So the only give you have between you and that fish is your rod. So I see people come out here and they bed fish with a really heavy rod, and I think that's the worst thing you could do, because something's got to give between an 8-pound fish, a fluorocarbon line, your reel, and you, and it needs to be the rod. It's my theory.